Hi, all. Welcome to episode 5 of Extend Explained Badly. I am your host today, Jules Mayberry, and this is the Query Bachelor, where these weekly statements will be competing for one thing: a healthy relationship with your data. Aww. Some are efficient and some are toxic. One of them might ruin your life. So let's get into it. Okay, welcome to the first session all about Workday query language. And I'm just going to let you know now that I am going to say wequel a lot. So if that is not what you say at home when you are referring to Workday query language, I am sorry. I call it wequel, and that is that. So first thing you probably want to know is, what the heck is wequel? Why do I need it? Where does this come up in Extend? So you have all of your REST APIs, your SOAP APIs, and whatnot. Why is this episode not about Graph API? We're not there yet. So, okay, don't come for me. So with wequel, we are able to pull in fields from our tenants that maybe we can't find in these REST APIs, like our custom calc fields, for instance. So it is just a way to basically form a statement to pull all of the data that you need into your Extend app pages or into your orchestrations. And it is something that you will heavily use when you are building bigger apps. And so I just felt that it was one of those things that came with Extend Basics. And since I'm new to Workday and new to Extend, this was all new for me. And wequel was explained to me as being similar to SQL, structured query language, in which I had no idea what that was either. So here we are. Okay. If you've ever seen SQL anywhere, probably on job applications or whatever, this is the more Workday aware version of that. So it adheres to our configured security and allows us to pull data out of our tenants that might be custom in some way. So that's really cool. Let's go back to here. Okay, so with building a wequel statement, I have learned a rule of thumb as I am learning all of this, that if I can get the data that I need in a report in the tenant, then I can wequel it into my Extend app, right? So if you don't have maybe a general understanding of Workday reporting, that's okay. We can kind of go over the basics there as well in terms of pulling together a wequel statement. So first, we should probably meet our contestants of a wequel statement. This is a section pulled right out of the documentation for my Extend Pro certification that is probably about to expire. And so here, this is my introduction to wequel, and I will explain it to you badly, of course. So we have these contestants or parts of a wequel statement. So these asterisks are going to be your required items. You need to know what data fields that you want to pull in and from what data source you want to pull them from. So that is your select and from. And before we go into the other contestants, let me just show you, if you don't have a general understanding of Workday reporting, what data sources are. So in your tenant, you can literally just search data sources and it will give you all of these data sources that you have in your tenants. And what these are buckets of data. So you have these fields of things that you might be trying to pull in, and they live in these buckets. And these buckets, I like to call them buckets. Workday likes to call them data sources. Anyways, so here you can filter through what you're trying to pull in based on whatever app you are building. A big go-to will probably always be all active employees. Here you can search that. I already have it open on another tab. You're clicking into this link. It'll bring you to this area. And this is where you can see all of the fields inside of this data source or bucket that you can pull in. And in your select statement, you are going to list these fields by their wequel alias. And how do we get a wequel alias? We just click this related actions button, and here we can see the wequel alias. This is what we are referencing in our select statements. So here in this example statement, you can see select employee hire date is manager. These are all the wequel aliases that will go right behind our select. From is your data source wequel alias. So let me make this thing go away. All right, so how do we get the data source weekly alias? Right here, same way, related actions. And here you'll see the WQL alias. So this is what you would put behind the word from in your WQL statements. So in this example, I have select yada, 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 whatever. Here's an example of a calc field from all active employees data source. Now let's talk about these other contestants that we have. So we have where. This is where we can filter. So if I wanted to get a list of all employees from my company where gender equals female or whatever. This is where you can filter through your data. You can use operators in here to sort of define your conditions for your filtering. We have group by. So if you are wanting to group your data by items that might have a common denominator, then this is where you can write that out in your legal statement. Having is like an option to subfilter, like in reporting. And then you can order it by ascending or descending order. Ascending would be like lowest to highest, descending would be highest to low. So depending on what you're sorting. And then limits, if you know that this statement could possibly return 3,000 rows of data, but you just want like the top 10 pieces or the top 10 objects, then you can limit it and set it to 10. So here are operators that do work in WQL statements. You can do equals to, not equals to, less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. You can do in, not in, empty, not as empty, true, false, and or not. This will all make sense as you sort of kind of figure out what it is that you want and to come back from your WQL statement. And then here's just an example of one where this person was trying to get the top 10 highest paid employees that were hired after January 1st of this year. So they're saying, give me the employee, give me their hire date. Are they a manager? What's their supervisory organization? And what is their total base pay annualized amount? And then we're going to pull it from the all active employees data source where their hire date is greater than January 1st of this year. We want to order it in descending order by their annual salary so we can get those highest paid employees on the top of our return. And we just want the top 10. So we're going to set a limit of 10. And that is how you will construct a WQL statement. Let me show you some things in your tenants that will help as well. So we're going to go into the tenants. So here, if you just type WQL in your search, you have these options, these things that you can do that are native Workday options. So you can build a WQL query. Just kidding. That's part of an extend app. That's a custom task. Don't ignore that. You can convert a report to WQL. You can view a WQL query results. And so this is where I have decided I was testing WQL for a nomination app that I was building. So here, and I just built out the report to just see if I could get the data that I needed in a report first. And then I was going to figure out how to build my WQL statement, get it into my Extend app. So this data source, here's my bucket. This is what I would put in the from part of my statements. So here is the WQL alias for that. And here I'm just pulling in two fields, worker, here's the WQL alias, and gender, WQL alias. Those are the easy ones. And then I'm filtering it by everyone whose gender equals female. And what I want to do is, yes, I was able to get everything that I wanted in this report. Now I want to turn it into a WQL statement so I can pull it into my extend page. That is where I can use this convert report to WQL option. Let me just copy that. And here it will ask you for what report you are wanting to convert. You will just pop in your report, and here it will actually give you the string. And if it's not able to get any sort of fields that you're asking for, it'll tell you here. So here we can take this query statement and we can do view WQL query results. And we can paste it here and see if it gives us what we saw on our report. When you click OK, it's going to give you a warning that this will only give you 500 instances. So if you're expecting 100 or if you're expecting 5,000, you're only going to get 500 here. So go ahead and click OK, and boom, this looks just like my report. So that means that this WQL statement does work. It is giving me every worker that is gender in female, the Workday ID for female. So that is the basics of how to build and construct your WQL statement. If you want to do a deep dive into how to make your WQL statements efficient, Make sure you're picking the best fields, the right data sources to make sure that it is performative in your apps and in your orchestrations. I highly suggest you watch this wizard session on YouTube about WQL performance optimization. They give you another collection of cool tips and tricks that you can use so that your statements are performing efficiently in your Extend app. The next session, I'm going to show you how to actually put it into App Builder and orchestrate so that you can call on these fields and this data that you are pulling in to Extend. So see you in the next session where things get a little endpointimate. So in the last session, we went over tenant side, the basics of building out our WQL statement, how we can get it constructed right through tasks that already live in your Workday tenant. And so now we want to start plugging in this data into our Extend app pages and orchestrate to use in our apps. So here's where we left off in the last session. We have generated a WQL query string. So we're just going to copy that. And we're going to go right into the developer site. So here is your developer site. And if you click this hamburger thing, you can go right into the REST API Explorer, and they actually have a section for WQL. So here is where you can test your strings and make sure that they are returning the data that you want. You'll want to click up here in the top right. Where's my ANSI? Okay, here I am. All right, here's my pink spotlight that you're used to. So if you go into the top right at this Manage Tenant Connections, you can log into your tenant. I'm going to log into my developer tenant. And so now when I test this WQL statement, it'll be pulling data from my developer tenant. So here it asks for the query string, and this is where I'm just going to paste it straight from the tenant, and I'm going to click try. And I'm getting a 200 response, which is good. This is how it looks. This helps me. I do want to I want to point your attention to this right here. So we have two options in the REST API Explorer for WQL. We have get and post. And the difference is if you use the post method, you're able to get larger data sets. So if you are trying to bring in a lot of data into your page or orchestrate, then I would definitely suggest using the post method, whereas get will just get you anything under this 2048 character limit. Okay, so that is the REST Explorer. Let's go into an actual app where you can pull in your legal statements. So we will use our usual just tester app that I use in my episodes. Here we have this WQL example. And so what you want to do, if you are kind of confused, let me log in. Okay, logging into the tenant. Okay. If you feel kind of confused at what you're looking at, please go back to episode 1 where I go over App Builder and everything you're seeing on the screen. I go through it. I walk you around the page, what everything means. And then in episode 3, Panic at the PMD, is where I go over what you are seeing here in this middle area. Your PMD is your page metadata. This is where you start designing your pages. So if all of this is confusing, stop here, just go back to episode 1, start from there. So here in the PMD endpoints area is where I am calling in these 3 WQLs. And they all have different base URL types because I have them mapped differently in my app metadata area, AMD. So here in the AMD at the bottom is where you will put all of your data providers. I go over this in episode 1 and 3 as well. Down here, I have 3 ways that I have built out my base URL for WQL calls. The one you will most commonly see is this one right here. When you are searching for WQL help in the developer forum, or if you're looking in the app catalog apps, they tend to use this method right here, which is fine. You just have to pay attention to how your total URL looks. And then we have my preferred version where I just go ahead and throw data query at the end of it. And it just makes my endpoints look a little bit cleaner throughout my pages. And then here the second one, you can just reference data and then slash. And I will show you how each of these would look in an endpoint. So here I am giving you an example of each of these. And so this first one, before we look at the page. So this first one is the one that you're used to seeing where it just ends with v1 version 1. You would just, under URL, you would build out your constants, and then you would put your statements in single quotes here, and then you would just have to make sure you include this data query in your return, and then do the path encode of your constant. And then we have this version 1. This is my preferred one. It's literally the same thing, except I'm not having to write this in there. I can just reference my constants in the return. And then the second one, this is where we had the v1 slash data slash, and this is where you'll build out in, okay. So remember I said if the get versus post, you can return more than that 2000 character limit. So this is an example of using a post for your WQL endpoint. And so here in the onSend, it's where you would construct your WQL statements, and you would just return the query and then reference your constant, and then make sure your HTTP method is post. Since WQL calls will respect the security of your tenants, if you have SSO, they will not be able to see anything. If you reference any of these fields that they don't have access to later in the page will error out. So if you are wanting all users who access this page to see all items referenced from your WQL statements, then you would want to use an ISU, most likely, for the auth type on your WQL endpoint. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so here in app preview, you can click on page inspector, and this is also just like the REST API Explorer. This is another way that you can sort of see what your endpoints are returning. So you can click on the endpoint, and here you can see how the data is constructed so that you know what to reference in your widgets later in the page to get the information that you need. So here I just wanted to get a grid, give me all of their names, give me what their title is, and then give me the ability to write, a little bit about what their interests are. So here is the name of the endpoint that I am pulling from in my grid. And then here in my grid, I am just saying, okay, row, give me this data set. And then I'm going to name it row. So when I say row, I'm referencing this data set. So here I have row.worker.descriptor, and I knew that I needed to do worker.descriptor because I was able to see through Page Inspector or the REST API Explorer what that data set breakdown looks like. So I knew I wanted the name, not the ID. And here in job title is just one item. So I was able to just do row.jobtitle to pull in their titles into that second column. So that is how you can use WQL endpoints in your extend pages. Here is how you could use it. One way you could use it in extends. So I like to build out my WQL statements in a create text template. If you don't recognize this page, then go back to episode 4 where I talk about orchestrates. So here is me building out an orchestration for one of my previous episodes, and I just slapped my WQL statement into a create text template, and then I just called on it in the body of an API request. And that is how it looks in Orchestrate. I used a post instead of a get because I wanted to be able to pull a lot more data than a get would have allowed me. And here in the REST API, so if you're wondering kind of what to construct here, this is the same thing as your base URL type. This is where you are constructing the URL that you are trying to pull this collection of data from. So I'm thinking that really covered how we get it in our extend pages in our orchestrate. I do have the DevCon background because I will be there on Monday through Thursday. So if you do watch my episodes or you recognize me, say hi. I would love to geek out about extends with any of you. So yeah, see you all Monday.